Very well, welcome to everybody to another episode of Two Bald Chaps. We're going to continue this week with the discussion on the Great Reset, and specifically the Great Narrative, which happened last week, and it is a forum that was set up in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates over a couple of days, discussing issues and concepts around the Great Reset. So the Great Narrative from the 10th to the 13th of November, and it is basically some elites and intellectuals talking about how to drive the agenda for the global agenda forward. I've had a look at a few of these videos. I'll be honest, there wasn't a huge amount there in terms of actual operational policies going forward. It's more just intellectualizing and talking about the points that they've already mentioned before in terms of what the main pillars of the Great Reset are, such as, working together as a globe, climate change, technology, and those talking points. I don't know if you've had any chance to look at any of those videos?
Yes, I did. And it's, like you said, I agree with your view there. It was mainly centered around framing the issues that need to be addressed, but it did not really go and make any progress in terms of offering solutions. I think it was more centered around establishing a consensus on the issues that need to be addressed. Like you said, climate change, social inequality, the role of technology in society, and such things, including economic issues like fiscal policy and the limits of it, moving forward into the brave new world that lies ahead.
Yes.
So, I don't think there's anything new there. It's pretty much material that you can find anywhere on the website of the World Economic Forum, and it seemed to be more of a social event to, like I said earlier, establish a consensus on the issues that need addressing.
Oh, I wonder if they're going to be doing this around the world, just hopping from one country to the next, hosting these fora again, trying to show the world that, look, this isn't a fait accompli. We are trying to create a consensus on these global issues, as you say. But, I am suspicious, if I'm honest.
Well, yes, the World Economic Forum has something, and this isn't a verbatim description. I think it's called the Young Leaders Forum or something of that nature. Mm-hmm. And many of the leaders that we have in the world today and that we've had in the past were sort of quote unquote graduates, if you like, from that forum. I think Angela Merkel was one. She was one of the young leaders. Sarkozy from France, he was one of the young leaders. Mm-hmm. So, the process of establishing consensus on the issues of the day really plays into the future leadership of Europe and America and other countries around the world, in that to get everyone moving in the same direction around the globe, as we still have individual nations. That could change in the future. It would help for everyone to be on the same page, as it were, on the major issues of policy like climate change and such like. So it is one of the main functions of the World Economic Forum, from my point of view, that it ensures that people are on board with the sort of the global message, if you like, that the World Economic Forum is outlining.
Yes.
For its participants.
Much was said about it in the videos I have seen. Much has been said about the pandemic and the climate change and the urgency to act. I just feel that we are being this emergency, or so-called emergencies are framed in a way that are pushing people towards accepting drastic action going forward. And there's a couple of things I wanted to really mention here, specifically regarding the pandemic and climate change. The economic devastation attributed to the pandemic was self-imposed in the main. I mean, you can say that, yes, of course, there was a disease and there is a disease. But the reaction is the governments that imposed the changes on their respective nations.
Yes.
And it could have been done differently. Governments will tell you that they had to act, shutting down the economy, curtailing people's freedoms. But was it all necessary? Some countries didn't act in such a draconian manner and largely escaped the worst of the disease. As a consequence, didn't suffer as much economically. And then also you had the scientists and epidemiologists who signed up to the Great Barrington Declaration, for instance, who tried to warn us about the physical and mental damage the proposed policies would cause. They were silenced and ridiculed. They tried to tell us about herd immunity. And, where is that term now? You don't hear it anymore.
Quite right.
Why not? We've passed the threshold for herd immunity months ago in Western countries. It seems they have no interest in following long-established medical norms regarding epidemics and pandemics, but more interested in jabbing ever younger people who are, very little risk of disease themselves.
Yes, yeah, I agree with that.
That's on the first part. On the second part, I said on regarding climate change, we're constantly being told that the science is decided, it's settled. I'm not so sure. Apparently there's no more questions to ask, and we're in the middle of a climate emergency. Is the climate changing? Yes, it's always changing. Is there an emergency? Not so sure. And neither are the 500 odd climate scientists, if you remember back in 2019, who wrote a letter to United Nations saying there is no emergency. The 500 climate scientists and professionals. Should we be trying to clean up our planet? Yes, of course we should. Should we be working together to accomplish this? Yes. Is it an emergency? Again, no, not so sure. So it seems with these twin, quote unquote, emergencies, the pandemic and climate change, they're being foisted upon humanity to justify the narrative, of urgent global change, which is being adopted by the World Economic Forum. There is a corollary in business. There's a long-standing business practice, where you manufacture an emergency to create a sense of urgency to affect a major change in a small period of time. It looked like this is what's happening here. I feel humanity is being railroaded in a specific direction without it really knowing what's happening.
Yes, that's right. Although it's not yet clear what the solution is going to be. We do know that there are certain developments in the pipeline, although how far they go towards addressing the alleged issues of climate change and the pandemic, we don't yet know. Much of the climate change issue seems to center around carbon emissions. How much human activity is contributing to climate change is very much a question that needs to be not just answered, but we also need to be honest about it. Is what we are doing as a civilization causing catastrophic damage to the planet in exactly the same way that forums like the World Economic Forum and others like them are implying? For example, we have a huge problem with the plastics. We have great patches of plastics in the oceans of the world, causing great damage to marine wildlife. And yet we are focused on carbon emissions, which seems to me to be a much lesser problem, especially given that carbon dioxide is needed for plant life.
Yes.
So I agree with you. The whole thing does seem a bit suspect from my point of view. There may well be climate issues that need addressing, but should it be addressed by these people who claim to be offering the solution?
And it should be addressed in such a drastic manner as well.
Yes, that's right. And, until we find out what their proposed solutions are, we won't really know what's behind it all, if you like. We know that they are trying to get the world as a whole operating on a new level in regard to finance, with the potential introduction of central bank digital currencies, the introduction of a carbon credit allowance for corporations and even nations. So it seems to be being used as a way to establish a global form of government, if you like, because after all, these issues will need to be monitored by an organization that transcends
Yes,
the national level.
I mean,
It could be.
they're very open about it in the great narrative, talking about governments unable to do things on their own, and that a global effort needs to be established. And that's just, for me, it's just a precursor to world governance and world government. So I think they're trying to, gently convince us that this is the way forward. I think they've already made up their minds, to be fair.
Yeah, so they're just convincing the populations. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
And on the issue of the pandemic, which was the first point you mentioned earlier on, is I agree with you. I mean, there certainly is an illness out there. However, the problems that have occurred because of the pandemic are largely problems of our own making. With the lockdowns, the travel restrictions and such like, which are not really known to cause any cure for the pandemic. There are countries which haven't done those things, countries like Sweden, for example, and they've fared no better nor worse than anyone else. These lockdowns seem to be having very little effect on the progress of the pandemic, and it's doubtful that that pandemics can be controlled in that manner. From my point of view, just as a layman, I'm certainly...
That's right. Or whether it's even favorable to do so. I mean, that's the point I was raising earlier on about the Great Barrington Declaration and their talk of what is it called, focused, a focused approach where you focus on the disease and on the healthy rather than locking up everybody who was healthy. So and those guys got ridiculed and sidelined. And you're talking about tens of thousands of scientists here, and and healthcare professionals.
Yes, there has been a censorship operation to silence the voices of reason. We know that if there is a pandemic, you cannot vaccinate your way out of it. The best thing you can do is to treat those who get ill, and then afterwards, once herd immunity has been built up, you can then have a vaccination problem for future outbreaks, but not whilst you're in the midst of a pandemic. However, several treatments have been proposed, have been tested for COVID, but at the same time, they have been ridiculed, discounted aggressively sometimes, with the vaccine being presented as the only solution to the pandemic, when we know that the vaccine doesn't stop you getting sick, it doesn't stop you transmitting the disease. And it's very much in question whether it even reduces the severity of the symptoms, which seems to be the main claim for the vaccine. So there are there are political forces at work here. It seems to me, it's not. This is not just about being confronted with a disease and us trying to find the cure for it. There seems to be something else moving underneath the whole issue.
Agreed. Okay, well, I think it's going to be a short one this week, as we're talking here about the Great Narrative, which is a sub-forum of the Great Reset. I think we can agree that it is as advertised. It's more narrative and very little tangible actions on the ground. But it's more about, I think, as we said, developing that or creating at least the illusion of consensus towards what to do about our common global issues.
Yes, I agree with that. That pretty much sums it up. And we'll certainly be keeping an eye out for future developments at the World Economic Forum, as they are a very influential organization.
Absolutely.
And the things that happen there do tend to percolate down into international governments and and society as a whole eventually. So it's worth keeping an eye on them.
For sure. So back to the Great Reset, I think, next week, and we'll see you then. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Two Bold Chaps. If you have any thoughts on what you heard today, feel free to share them with us in the comments section. And if you enjoyed the content, please like, share and subscribe. And we'll see you in a week's time for the next episode. Bye for now.